living God. So it's important to know, who do you say that I am? So Jesus had complimented Peter, for his bold and for him being correct. Flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Jesus reveals to Peter that he spoke by divine inspiration. Even if he didn't know it at the time, in this, Peter was generally blessed. We should be able to know God, not just on a fleshly term, but in a spiritual sense as well. Okay, so we too often expect God to speak in strange and unnatural ways. Here, God spoke through Peter so naturally that he didn't even realize it was the Father who was in heaven that revealed it to him. He didn't realize where it came from. Okay, he just knew. He just knew in his spirit that this is the Messiah. Okay, and Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which in heaven. And I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it." He's letting them know. Back in those days, the word church, this is the first time in the New Testament that church was brought up. The words on this rock, and he says there's plenty of rocks. Jesus is the cornerstone, okay? Peter, by his own testimony, did not see himself as the rock on which the church was founded. He wrote that we are all living stones, but Jesus is the cornerstone. We could say that Peter was the first believer, that he was the first rock among many rocks. I will build my church, okay? First use of the word church in the New Testament, using the ancient Greek word ecclesia. Significantly, this was well before the beginnings of what we normally think of as a church, the day of the Pentecost, which came up in Acts 2, okay? So this shows that Jesus was prophesying that would come from these disciples, these apostles, and those who would believe in their message that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. All right, so, and I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatsoever thou shalt build on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever shall be loosed on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Interesting. So Jesus says that there is absolutely nothing in heaven or earth that will prevail against it. Jesus offered a promise that the forces of death and darkness can't prevail against or conquer the church. It is a valuable promise. Once again, we get into the promises of God in dark or discouraging times for the church, that nothing will prevail. The gates of hell, absolutely nothing, will prevail against the church. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. The idea of Peter holding the keys of the kingdom of heaven has captured the imagination of many Christians through the centuries, okay? So many people are like, well, what the keys to it? The idea that the authority comes from Jesus, who gave it to Peter, who set his hands on the heads of approved and ordained men, who in turn set their hands on the heads of approved and enduring men, and so on and so on and so on through the nation. And whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever is loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. And in the times of the Jewish times, so they would make the decision on what was clean and what was unclean, or what was holy and what was unholy, what made their houses unpurified. The power for binding and loosing is something that the Jewish rabbis of that day used. Okay, they bound or loosed an individual and applying the point of the law. So Jesus promises that Peter and the other apostles will be able to set the boundaries or the authority for the new covenant community. This was authority given to the apostles and the prophets to build a foundation. And we can learn more about that in Ephesians 2 and 20. So it's Jesus giving permission and authority, okay, to say, hey, this is with the law, this is against the law. Binding and loosing, okay. Coming up with these terms like, okay, this is good, this is forbidden, this is allowed. So then let's move down a little bit. And then charged he his disciples that they shall tell no man that was Jesus the Christ. He charged them. It wasn't his time. It wasn't time for him to be revealed at that time yet. It wasn't time. Okay? It's just that simple. This was predicted work of Messiah. from that time, Jesus began to show to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and raised the third day. So he's telling them, okay, so they went from this is our friend, this is our teacher, this is a great person, to this is the Messiah, to now the Messiah is telling us that he must die, he must leave us. He's all powerful. But he's telling us that he must suffer at the hands of flesh? No. And so, of course, Peter and his unwittingness said, no, that this can't be. Then Peter took himself aside and began to rebuke him, saying, far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you. But he turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Could you imagine that? First, you're being, brought up and said, okay, you know that I'm the Messiah because of God, but now you're saying that I'm from the devil? It was hard to see Peter following the steps. Peter confessed Jesus as a Messiah. Jesus compliments Peter, telling him that God revealed this to him. Jesus tells of his impending suffering, death, and resurrection. Peter feels this isn't right. It's a feeling that he goes on, okay? And he feels that he hears from God and therefore has some authority or right to speak. Peter begins to rebuke Jesus. It says began. So that suggests that Peter gets only so far before Jesus cuts him off. What Peter isn't aware is that he's acting in the flesh. He's just concerned about, hey, my friend, what do you mean? What do you mean you're going to get killed? What do you mean that you got to turn over your hands? No, that can't be right. We can infer that Peter was bold enough to rebuke Jesus. He was confident that God told him that he was right and that Jesus was wrong at this point. Where it all broke down was that Peter was far too confident in his ability, but also it was a fleshly thing. Okay, so when he said, "Get thee behind me," it's a strong rebuke from Jesus. Okay, but what Peter didn't realize was that in that very same moment, he was used by God and he was used by Satan, because it came through him to say, "Okay, no, don't do that," because Satan did not want Jesus to die on that cross. Satan didn't want man to have a right to salvation. Jesus knew there was a satanic purpose in discouraging him from his ministry on that cross. And Jesus would not allow that purpose to succeed. We can be sure that Peter was not aware that he spoke for Satan, just as a moment before he was not aware that he spoke for God. It is often much easier to be a tool of God or of the devil than we want to believe. Okay, so it says, you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men. Jesus exposed how Peter came into the satanic way of thinking. He didn't make a deliberate choice to reject God and embrace Satan. He simply let his mind settle on the things of men instead of the things of God, and Satan took advantage. He simply let his feelings, his flesh, get in the way. And it's a human thing. Instead of depending on God, depending on the flesh, depending on our own understanding. It says, lean not on our own understanding. Jesus called to his disciples. Jesus declares his expectation that his followers will follow him by dying to self. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. This was a word spoken to disciples, okay? So it's saying, deny yourself. It was bad enough for the disciples to hear that Jesus would suffer, be rejected, and die on the cross. Now, Jesus told them that they must do the same. Pick up your cross. Everybody knew what Jesus meant when he said this. Everyone knew that the cross was an unrelenting instrument of death. The cross had no other purpose. Yes, now we spruce it up. We make it, a fashionable item. We make it something grand, something great. But in those days, in reality, the cross was absolutely nothing but for death. It was assigned to crucify people. It's to hang there. So, in the 20 years after Jesus, we have done a pretty good job of sanitizing and ritualizing the cross. Yet Jesus says something much like this: walk down death road daily and follow me. Taking up your cross wasn't a journey. It was a one-way trip. There was no return ticketing. It was never a round trip, okay? Every Christian should be able to say, okay, I know I can't save myself. Cross bearing does not refer to some irration in life. Rather, it involves the way of the cross. Okay? The picture of a man already condemned, required to carry his cross on the way to the place of execution, as Jesus was required to do. Meaning that we know Jesus died on the cross for our sins. It is our cross to bear. We know that one day we will die. We know that we cannot save ourselves. We should be giving up our lives because we know who Jesus Christ is. And we know that we need to deny ourselves and take it up. Jesus made denying himself equal to take up the cross. The two express the same idea. The cross wasn't about self-promotion. It wasn't about self-affirmation. The cross-carrying across knew they couldn't save themselves. Denying self is not the same as self-denial. We practice self-denial when for a good purpose. When we do activities, we give up things, we give up, we do our fasting, but we deny self when we surrender ourselves to Christ and we are determined to obey his will. And that's what it's about. We know Jesus Christ. We're willing to give ourselves over to Christ. We're willing to obey his will. For whosoever desires to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man will come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works. We must follow Jesus this way because it is the only way that we will ever find life. It sounds strange to say it. You will never live until you first walk your death with Jesus, but it is the idea. You can't gain resurrection life without dying first. You don't lose a seed when you plant it, though it seems dead and buried. Instead, you set the seed free to be what it is always intended to be. What profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own son? Avoiding the walk to death with Jesus means that we may gain the whole world and end up losing everything. Jesus himself had the opportunity to gain the world by worshiping Satan. In Luke 4:5-8, he said, bow down, worship me. I'll give you everything. But he found life and victory in obedience instead. Okay? So amazingly, the people who live this way before Jesus are the ones who are really, genuinely happy. Giving our lives to Jesus all the way and living as an other-centered person does not take away from our life. It adds to it. We will reward each. He's going to reward each of us according to his works. Okay, this is the ultimate gain given on this day. If we live life blind to this truth, we will lose our own soul. We must know, and we must know who Jesus is. We must know that we have to walk in his way. There is a promise to see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Assuredly, I say to you, there are some standing here who shall not taste death till they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Jesus said this at this moment to emphasize an important truth. Walking with Jesus doesn't just mean a life of death and crosses. It also means a life of power and glory of the kingdom of God. Jesus promised some of his disciples would see glimpses of that power and glory. Okay? So we are his disciples. We are his Christians. We are the people who he's calling for. We will see that power and glory. All he's asking for us is to follow. We have a purpose today to be able to say, yes, I know him, with infallible proof. We believe and know that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God and that he died and rose again. We believe that he has power on earth to forgive sins, to heal the sick, and to raise the dead. There has never been a man nor a name like Jesus. Neither is there salvation in any other, for there is none other name under heaven given among men, whereby we must be saved. We are destined to meet Jesus one day. What we sow today, we are destined to reap tomorrow. And this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. That's coming from John 17:3. Do you know Christ is our Redeemer? Yes, I know that my Redeemer lives, and that he shall stand at the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God. Jesus came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believed on his name. John 1:11-12. May the Lord have a blessing to the hearer and doer of his words. Service is now returned to the hands of our chosen one.
We want to thank and praise the Lord for our Sunday school this morning. I want to ask, is there remarks from anyone? If not, we're going to have our 10 commandments. Church statement. Many professed Christians claim that Christ changed, abolished, or took away the law and replaced the 10 commandments with the gospel. Nevertheless, in this church, we believe and do firmly teach that the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ abolished a long list of sacrificial and rural laws, all which had their fulfillment or completion in him. But all moral laws, as we know, are eternal. It is written, "Forever, O Lord, thy word is settled in heaven." Psalms 119 and 98. It is written, and God spake all these words, saying, "I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt and out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto me any graven image, or any likeness, or anything that is in the heaven above, or that in the earth beneath, or that in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I am the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquities unto the fathers upon the children, unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and show mercy to thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. In 6 days should I labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy strangers that was in thy gates. For in the 6 days the Lord made the heaven and the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. The rest the seventh day, wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. The Lord bless thee and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee. The Lord give thee peace. Amen.